Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall, on the other end. If you're watching with your eyes and not just listening, you might not recognize this human.
It's Bruce Willis.
That's a very complimentary comparison. You can take
that's
it.
True. There's many.
You've removed quite a lot of hair from your face.
Yeah,
I think for those watching.
Yeah, it's crazy,
Pascal
isn't it?
Looks like a different human. Completely
different look. I mean, to be fair, my head shape is actually decent enough to wear something like this. It was so funny, Steve, because when I removed the hair, I was laughing myself about it, right? Because it is funny to look at. And I posted something over on Instagram, and it's kind of like the meme about lifting, where people perceive, okay, I'm starting to lift because I want to attract the other gender, most of the time males getting attractive than for females. And what happens is that males then end up messaging you and you're getting the attention of males mostly. And it was kind of the same here as well. I didn't do it for females though, but it was more like lots of males reached out to me saying like, hey man, your head, the shape of the head is actually very much great for I wouldn't say the hairstyle because it's not really a hairstyle, it's just like shaving it off, but they have a point. I mean, it is decently round.
I prefer you with hair, I think, though.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And it was also the moment when I then compared kind of the before and after for me personally. And this sounds vain to some people, but I think that I look so much better with a mustache. Also, I didn't expect that, to be honest, because there has been such a long time since I didn't wear a mustache. With proper hair and a mustache, looks so much better, to be honest. So, yeah.
I can speak to it because I have, obviously, I think we've spoken about it before, where sometimes people take dig at me because I have some receding parts on my head, and people even say like it's as bad enough where they think I should just shave my whole head off already and just be done with it. And I'm like, I don't think it's that bad yet, but I've considered, like, I've looked into hair transplants, like, to that point. So like I would put it in the same category of, like, obviously you had your what's it called? Was it gynecomastia you actually had? Yeah. So you had that surgery, and I think people can relate to that. That just made you feel much more comfortable, confident in your skin. Same with like hair on my head. Like, I'd love to be that guy that's just happy to shave it all off. But like, if I can get it easily amended, I would.
On that note, Steve, because it became so apparent to me, and I even talked with Katie about it on Friday, the reason why I have shaved off my head I shaved off the hair on my head is because on Friday I finished my back piece, which was the entire tattoo on my back, which is actually then going over the back of my head as well. And we finished it on Friday. So that was because for this I needed to actually then shave off all of my hair because it was important so that there's no hair actually then getting into that area and stuff. And I was walking around shirtless the entire time, which is something that I'm simply not comfortable with, independent of whether I'm lean or not, you know? And right now, I feel confident in my own skin and body. But at the same time, I was sometimes thinking, what would I now, or how would I feel now if that gyno hasn't been removed at that time? It was actually then going through my head because I wouldn't have felt comfortable sitting there, people taking pictures of me, videoing me walking around, right, shirtless. I wouldn't have felt comfortable with that. And I was so happy. Also, just like seeing myself then in the mirror, because I sometimes need to go to the toilet, seeing myself in the mirror and just seeing a well-developed chest. And that made a huge difference, I think. And the same goes probably then also back to kind of receding hair, because I had like so far 4 to 5 clients who underwent that surgery as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's super popular, actually. Like, you don't realize how many people are doing it. And like every celebrity, like older celebrity have had that sort of thing done.
Would you do it when you're growing older, Steve?
Basically, the thing that put me off was actually the finasteride and what's the other one? I always forget what they're both called. I remember the finasteride. I forget the other one. Someone will say it in the comments. And those can have negative impacts on like hormones and libido and that sort of thing. And I'm like, for me, bodybuilding trumps everything. So it's like creatine and hair loss, and like, fuck it, taking creatine. Obviously, the evidence there is so weak for hair loss. Like, if it was strong, then I might actually consider it. Well, I probably would. But like this, I don't want to take these like various, I don't know if they're chemicals or drugs or whatever they are that you have to kind of consume to maintain your hair once you've had the hair transplant. If it was as simple as getting a hair transplant and then you're good, like that would be much more convincing to me to do it.
So you have to take additionally on top of getting the hair transplant some additional drugs because I looked into it, because I was on one picture seeing that on the back side of my head there's starting to actually also become some gaps, which makes sense because my granddad from, of course, mother's side, because it's always delivered by Steve.
I just found what it was called, minoxidil.
Oh, never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Yeah, they're the two that are like evidence-based, essentially.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Maybe someone in the comment section can talk more about it, because I'm clueless when it comes to this. The reason why I was looking into that is, of course, it's being inherited by or via the X chromosome. So you can always look into whether your mom's dad had kind of some baldness, and that's the case for my granddad. He had just that upper plate, which is very common because on the sides, the hairs aren't really reacting to DHT as much as the hairs on the top side of your skull. And at some point, probably it's going to happen maybe to you as well, that we are both getting a little bit more bald on the top of our heads. And I was then also considering, like, would I get it at some point? And I've talked with Katie about it, and she said, like, man, you're getting older anyway. So if it then happens when you're then in the midst of your 40s or 50s, do you really then need to care that much about your looks anymore when it comes to kind of getting bald? And she has a very fair point. And I think that I got my eyes fixed. I got my breasts fixed, which both are kind of more aesthetics things. And I'm unsure whether I would get a hair transplant, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, mine's the same with my mum's dad. He had like, what's it called? I think of it like a bishop, like an old bishop.
Yeah.
He just has like a completely like nothing on the top, but he has like a ring round it type of thing. So I'm fairly thick everywhere apart from the like Vegeta hairline, basically, is what I've somehow developed. So it's just coming backwards. It's just going backwards. But I think for me, it depends how convenient it becomes. Like, I don't want to go to Turkey to have to go through this process, because it's like, man, that's a lot to have to travel all that way to do all of that. If it was in London and more affordable, that's when I'm like, hey, like, I'd consider it more. Also, if you get it quite young and you recede, like say you get it done now and then you recede more, you could have a like hair, then a gap, then hair. And that's not going to look amazing either. So you might even have to get the operation or the procedure several times. So it's similar to what Katie was saying. I try and just like be like, hey, age with grace, almost like type of thing. When the time comes that you decide you're uncomfortable with keeping your hair as it is, shave it off. And if I feel terrible about the shaved look, then I'd maybe consider something at that point. Wearing a hat all the time, maybe.
No,
or
totally.
Surgery.
and also just to get back to, because I wasn't aware that you need to then further take some drugs, which now that you've brought it up makes complete sense, because the reason why you're losing hair most of the time is due to high or elevation of DHT in your system. And you probably then have to lower it in order then for the new follicles, or what they are called, kind of to stay in there, depending on the type of surgery that you're getting, I think. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, one of those two that I mentioned, the finasteride and midoxanil, one of them suppresses the DHT, and the other one of them can suppress it so that it stops hair loss, and then, well, helps to stop hair loss, and then the other one can help regrowth. So, like, again, it makes sense that you would take those, like, after surgery. And again, I'm just like, man, I just don't want to, anything that could negatively impact like hormones and health, like to any degree, I'm not interested in. And actually, I asked Martin McDonald, the listeners will probably know who he is, at Mac Nutrition. He has a completely shaved head, but he was doing like the combination for a while, because he's had a shaved head for ages now.
Yeah.
He lost his hair probably pretty early. It thinned pretty early for him. and he experienced like those negative symptoms of like loss of libido, not feeling that great, like low test kind of symptoms, and he was like, it just isn't worth it. And he's a super confident guy, and like he suits the shaved head. Like now when you look at him, it's like totally normal. So I think it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I can absolutely understand why people are undergoing surgery, because it gives you a big boost in confidence. And I can now also attest to, I've never had it this way, and I would have downplayed it probably, that it's not that big of a deal of having hair or not. But now going through it and knowing what it feels like, what it looks like, and if you still can have hair, it's not that big of a deal. I can just regrow it. But if you're in a situation, you're still in your maybe 20s even. I still know people who had it already kind of at the later stages of their teenage years, those unfortunate souls. But if you have it like in your 20s, early 30s, and you're already receding, I can absolutely understand why you are undergoing surgery then, especially if you know that you can't regrow it. And I'm more so in a luxurious position, and I'm just contemplating of like, would I ever do this if I'm receding in the midst of my 40s or 50s? And I don't think that I would, but this is me now talking, the person who can regrow hair.
Yeah. Would you ever have a tattoo coming over the rest of your head? Like some people get a full like hair. It's almost like you can get actually hair tattoos, can't you?
I know.
But it just looks like a shaved head, basically.
I
so you could get those gaps filled in that you mentioned, actually.
Yeah, I think Joe Ballinger did that.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think I could be wrong though. But he's talking a lot about it right now over on Instagram, talking about his procedure, and I completely forgot what the name for this was, for this procedure of like tattooing kind of micro pigmentation or something like this.
Maybe, yeah.
And I think he did that, which looks fantastic, to be honest.
Yeah, just looks like a slightly, not a shaved head, but like a, don't know, a one or something.
Exactly. So for me personally, the funny thing is, Steve, when we finished the tattoo, so my tattoo artist then said like, all right, so what are we going to do and put on the top of your head? And I was, of course, contemplating on what to do there, simply because now it's on the back of my head, and it would just make sense to have something coming to the forefront and also then on top of it. But Katie, apparently, so she's very cool with doing whatever I want to, right? But she was also then saying and starting to say like, you could hear it in her voice that she was like not so fond of that idea of maybe putting something on top of your head. And she was bringing up things and examples of like, why? Because you will be regrowing your hair anyway. So why would you put something on top of your head? So I'm thinking like, why not? You know? But probably this is not high on my priority list of tattoos to get. So I will push it a little bit to the side so that there's still some time left before I would actually contemplate or consider doing something like this. But it is definitely an option. I'm quite certain about this.
Yeah, it's for your, because I know we've spoken about like what are no-goes, and I guess that's just out of the no-go zone.
Yeah, the thing is, because right now I have Attack on Titans on my back, right? And my tattoo artist, he had a fantastic idea of maybe putting the Jaw Titan, but Porco on top of it, because he's just the most badass looking Jaw Titan, in my opinion, and having him like here, where then the teeth are coming into kind of the full front here, which would look quite aggressive to me.
That'd be intense.
Yeah. That's why I can understand why Katie is even like, oh, do you really want to do this? I love you, but do you really want to wear this here today, you know?
Yeah, that would look like there's certain areas that are just a bit more intimidating than others. Yeah, it's basically the non-conventional areas that you get them done, and more visible.
And I have plenty of other spaces before I want to do something like this, you know. So let's just first get the other stuff out of the way before then considering this.
So yeah, I guess we can speak to the weekend, because that was like the start to the weekend, and then you had like a complete like worse combination of timings for everything. So that meant you weren't able to be at the RP and Revive seminar. But thankfully, it still ran pretty damn smoothly. It's like I was saying to you, it would have been amazing to have you there, but it was like, hey, it wasn't super stressful not to have an additional pair of hands. Part because it was just very exclusive. There wasn't a crazy crowd there, which was a good thing. It was like we talked about before. Like, it's actually really nice to have a small number of just really like-minded individuals. Mike was saying this too. He was like, not that the crowd's never great, but when it was like an even smaller crowd, where it's a bit more exclusive, everyone who was there really wanted to be there and experience everything like inside out. And also, because I went to the gym on the Friday to collect like the key card, and I saw the gym, and I was like, yeah, this is going to work out great, because it was a good space. There was plenty of room for the number of people there and for us coaching people as well. And they had good equipment. It wasn't all like perfect as every gym. Like, there's never a perfect everything, but for what we needed, it was very, very good. So yeah, really pleased how everything ran actually over the course of the weekend, and people seemed to be very happy about kind of the experience there too. I was like trying to go around, you know, like you go around and make sure everyone's happy and they're okay and that sort of thing. It's like I mentioned to you, the only downside was that it was a bit like Fort Knox or like a prison, where it's like you had to have a key card to get in and to get out. So we had to like escort people out and in. And I didn't realize at first. So people got like trapped in a stairwell, which wasn't ideal. And they're like, don't know, hopefully not too claustrophobic. And then we eventually saved them and let them out. But already talking about setting up for next year. And even that gym owner was super hyped by it. He's like thinking of new ideas of how we can like expand it further. So yeah, really pleased overall.
So let's talk about this a little bit more in depth though, what happened and how the entire day and the event went. First off though, I just want to bring up one thing, and that is that there, I think in total it was like 25 participants, which in my opinion, many people probably didn't really expect it to be that exclusive. And the more exclusive it is, the better it is for each individual, in my opinion, because you're getting more time from the specialists or professionals for the time that you are there, which is, of course, a freaking amazing experience. The best concerts, for example, that I had in the past were always the ones that were in a very, very tight, small venue, where you had the feeling that it's an exclusive sensation, you know, and that's
very intimate.
Yeah, that's why I think that the event itself probably was the same for most participants. And from what I've seen, what I've heard, many people found it to be highly valuable and very much worth also then the finances as well.
Yeah, I think it's just a case of like, if you ever have questions for like someone like Mike, myself, Jared, like even like obviously the masterclass had like 2 hours of like exclusive time with us. So like perfect opportunity to ask lots of questions. But even outside of that, like the general, like you said, 25 or like 20 odd participants outside of masterclass, like everyone who had a question could have got that asked over that weekend, like no doubt about it.
And not just like in 1 to 2 minutes, right? It was more like
no. It's like a Mike Israetel answer.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that you couldn't get over on social media or anything, like even not so much in a Q&A live stream session or so. There you can go up to that person and have like a one-on-one conversation where you can then reply and answer and all that kind of stuff, you know? And that's a dynamic that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, that's something I was concerned about. Is I was like, hey, a lot of these, like they did a squat, they did an RDL, like bent over row, upright row. And I was like, man, like actually you can get these videos online, like RP have great videos, but there's something to doing it in person where someone can actually be taken through the exercise, and you as an individual can watch them being taken through the exercise, see the little tweaks that Mike is suggesting, and them getting even more out of it. And you just learn something from being there hands-on. And it's like you said with the questions, like you can ask a question, it can get answered, but then you can't respond, like it can't happen. Whereas you can actually have a dynamic. You'd be like, oh, that's not quite what I meant, or, oh, okay, that makes sense. What about this? That's, I think, like the in-depth knowledge and the actual like fully fleshed out answering and understanding of things, something that you can't experience online.
Yeah. And also on So funny enough, because most participants were able to, of course, purchase another ticket for another training slot for 50% off. And so many people on the same day after the Saturday went ahead and purchased another ticket then for the Sunday. And I think it just speaks for itself as to how much they've gained out of the first day already. And that's why they were so willing and kind of eager to purchase another ticket, because probably also the things that you just mentioned. They've realized it. They felt it for the first time, firsthand, that there's so much value to be gained here.
Absolutely. Yeah, loads of people doing, they're like coming up to you like, can I book in tomorrow? I was like, yeah, go ahead. Like, that'll be great. And people survived. Like, there was a lot of people, I don't know how many people did it, but there was a good handful of people who did every single session and they survived. Like, they probably are a bit wrecked this week. But I was asking kind of why did they do that? Like, what was their thinking? They were just like, I wanted to make sure I went through every muscle group and understood how to get the most from every muscle group, essentially, so that now they can go away and apply that to everything. So like, if you just choose back, for example, maybe that's just a struggle area. You can grow everything else really well. Cool. But if you're like, man, I'm not sure about chest, like quads, hamstrings, if you can book in for every session, you're now perfectly set up to move forward. So it's just, I understand now like why people are booking in. They didn't just want pain. They're like, hey, I want to make sure I get everything covered so that now I can just be fully confident moving forward with my training for hypertrophy.
Yeah. And I just want to also further highlight that the hamstring session was the one that was the least visited or participated in. And even there were some groups, I would assume, that had like one-on-one experiences, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we ever had completely one-on-one, because I think we it would have been probably if we, for some muscle groups we split into 4, for some we split into 3 groups. So like me and Nick on one exercise, for example. So for hamstrings, we were both on leg curls, and then Mike was on, he actually did bent over rows because it was like, we don't need 2 hip hinges. He did bent over rows and a little bit of easy good mornings just for technique. And then Jared did straight leg deadlifts. So it was basically straight leg deadlifts with lying leg curls. But yeah, straight leg deadlifts take a while. But there were some groups where it was just like 2 people, 3 people.
Man, I mean, just, I wasn't there, but I'm of course biased because I was one of the organizers. But just imagining that you have 2 hours basically for yourself with then Mike, Jared, you, and Nick is a crazy value add, I think.
Yeah, there was no, what we were kind of concerned about in organizing was people hanging around in terms of like too long a rest time. There was none of that. Like, people were like thankful to have enough rest. Like, when you have at most 4 people with you, like, you're not resting that long when everyone's just going after the next person. So actually, that from that perspective worked really, really nicely. And I think the reason they booked onto other sessions is because they had to wait, maybe because they're like, hey, I've done the morning instruction, now it's like hamstrings, and then after lunch I'm on for my exercise. Why don't I just jump into this session here too? So some people did that. No,
absolutely. Are there any kind of takeaways for you from the weekend? What was there anything also for yourself? How did you perceive it? Was it easy for you to put people through a workout? Because I know the type of person you are, Steve, that you're kind of quite anxious when it comes to being an instructor and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like we've probably spoken about before, I only one-on-one PT'd for like not even a year, and certainly not a year full time. It was like maybe like half a year full time doing it. And I was much less confident then than I am now. And I didn't have that many one-on-one clients. So I'm used to watching technique on a video and then critiquing it, but being there in real time and doing it, it's an interesting, and it is different. But it's also different because I so intuitively get into exercises that I sometimes don't know what I'm doing. I just do it, if that makes sense. Like, I was doing lat prayers and I was like, I need to do some reps myself, think about what I'm doing in real time to then be able to give you the cues to move forward. Same with like lying leg curls. I don't just know them off the top of my head. They're like things I inherently do. So it was actually fine. I actually part of it was I was often put onto the less like compound complex lifts because obviously people want Mike and Jared for that, I think makes sense. So there's less you can instruct someone on like a lat prayer or on a lying leg curl. Obviously there are bits, but if someone's already got great technique, it's just about making them control it more than they normally do. Probably really make sure to take control of the length and range, potentially pause there, push themselves really hard. and also brace and have some aggression towards those final reps rather than just like letting like just I don't know, if you just go soft throughout, you never really get to those like hard repetitions. So no, I think it was actually all right. It was good to be challenged in that way too, and I think I actually found myself wanting to like not take over, but like if me and Nick were there, it was like both of you were kind of having inputs and stuff, so you couldn't really like as much take over, which is fine. It worked well, but I did find myself wanting that. So no, it was good to do that. And like it makes me think, we talked about potentially doing like a Christmas thing with clients, like actually taking through some of our clients through any exercises they're struggling with and like helping them in the gym like in real time to be able to do that. I'd be confident doing that. So it was cool.
What you've talked through now just sounds so much that experience pays off, where you just like, you walk the walk, and that's why you can teach someone else on what to look for, because otherwise it's so hard to then describe we've talked about it in the past, of what is the pump, what is it that you are looking for, how does it feel, right? And if someone doesn't really know what the pump feels like, how should you explain it to someone else, especially the differentiation between pushing movements, for example, and back movements? We know that the pump feels quite different there. So if you're looking for the same exact sensation on the chest, you may look for the wrong thing, or it's kind of like a lost cause. And if you are then there going through that range of motion yourself, what am I even looking for? And what should I explain here so that the other person knows what to look for? I think this is where experience is so crucial.
No, absolutely. And one thing that actually helps, I think for some people, they were quite often thinking about more A to B than they were thinking about the muscle they were targeting. And so just being able to understand where like origin and insertion is, like, hey, we're trying to train the lats with the lat prayer. You don't need to like pull behind your body or extend your elbows. Like you're not just trying to get range of motion. You're trying to get the lat as stretched as possible and as short as possible, like pull through your elbow, that sort of thing. So having that like basic understanding for people and helping them understand, okay, what's the movement that muscle does in that exercise also helped. And then also it gave me a good appreciation for something we mentioned when you, me, and Mike trained, where some exercises feel good to one of us and not the others. And maybe even our RARs can look different, like Mike can grind for days. And also just little tweaks, like our technique looks a little bit different. That was also the same with people we were like training. Like some people had like way longer legs or limbs and things like this. And so you had to adjust the exercise for them. And some people, actually Terrence, who was there over, and he did every session, and like he just like hits a wall. He's like fast twitch. You're like, you got another one, and then he goes for it and you're like, no, you don't. Whereas other people, they just like, okay, one left, and then they go again. You're like, okay, let's just keep going until you can't. So it was very interesting. That
brings me to the next question that I had now, or that's kind of waiting for me to put out there. And that is, was there a common mistake that many people did, or was there any kind of overarching thing where you guys needed to push the person in one direction, and that was kind of common amongst nearly all of the participants?
I would say most people were very, very good. Some people were a little bit better than others. Like some people were from Team Full ROM, so they already like, they knew the kind of the thing there. But it's almost like, it's similar to the post I did recently on my hack squats, where I was like, I had good hack squat form before, but now it's better. Like there's almost always room to improve. Like even me, when I'm watching people train that weekend, I was like, man, maybe I could go a bit slower on some of my eccentrics. Maybe I could pause a little bit more in some of these.
Yeah.
So I would say that's some of it too. That was most of it. Like the guys at RP are very big on very slow eccentrics, lots of control, forget the load, make it as hard as possible for the muscle, pause in the lengthened position, no momentum, no drive, all of that sort of stuff. Whereas some of that, like especially with the length and partial things, like I like to maybe consider that angle and momentum to get it short or whatever. So I think that was more emphasized for people. It's like they probably lifted a bit slower, they probably were a bit stricter, and they probably use lighter weights than they normally do as well.
On that note then, how do you feel about this? What's your sentiment, Steve?
I think I've done that before, and I think it works really well in some circumstances, but then in others, not as well. So for me, for back, when I was very strict with my back training, I just didn't get, I had to, well, as we said that time, my volume got stupid high. And I think there's just this period of time where if you're to push a muscle close enough to failure, like I like some aggression there. I can't stay stoic when I'm really pushing towards failure, because I think people just don't get there. So I think it just leads to me having lower volumes. So I still have that sentiment, but I do think it will make me, in this deload week, I'm going to try it a little bit on some things where I just slow them down a little bit more, see if I can, like, if I'm not letting my ego kind of get in the way, see if I can apply kind of what I did to my hack squat, where I've dropped the load by like 10%, but I've controlled it more and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that I'm still maybe not quite to the extreme where I'm like no momentum on stuff. And I don't think necessarily Mike holds that like strictly no momentum. Jared might more. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it, I think.
I'm the same as you, Steve. And I think that a couple of episodes ago, we've talked about that I need some momentum on some lifts, and I need to move fast on some lifts to have a better mind-muscle connection and to get better pumps rather than moving too slowly. But this is kind of a trial and error, figuring out what exercises these are for you specifically. And I think also people overstate maybe sometimes the riskiness of momentum, because the biggest argument I think against using some momentum is you're increasing the likelihood of injury. While I won't really deny that this may be the case, we always then probably have to differentiate between the movement itself, how strong and advanced you are, etc., etc. When someone like Jared, who's using, of course, a lot of weight already because of his stature, because he's enhanced, because of his training age, I can definitely see that the risk is elevated. If he's then using something like a hack squat, for example, and using too much momentum, can see this, especially on a movement like this. But then, if you are a natty guy such as ourselves, and you are on a hack squat much stronger than I am, if I were to do this, I can probably get away with a little bit more momentum. Maybe not so much on the hack squats, because that is a common movement where people are experiencing knee issues. But that was just like, now I was just throwing it out there. But let's just take a lat pull down. I think the risk of you getting injured on a lat pull down, if you're using a little bit of momentum, is very much overblown and overstated, like very much. And using this in order to actually reach the range of motion that is still adequate for you is totally fine. And there's a fine line though between kind of swinging the entire body for momentum or using the stretch as the momentum, kind of like a rubber band, right? And still having overall tightness.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think just your point on like natties, we're just like the risks. Basically, I think our body's going to break down before we cause ourselves like we just get to something will happen before we can cause ourselves huge issues.
100%.
Like even with dieting, like you could beat us into the ground, like especially males, not so much females, but like it's very unlikely we're going to cause ourselves like a really like health risk versus someone who's enhanced. Like
most people.
When you see people like ripping, they're like, tearing their chest or whatever. How many natty guys do you see doing that sort of stuff? Not to say it doesn't happen, but it's much less likely because our bodies are just like, we just can't push ourselves to that extreme limit. The comparison I would use is like, I don't know, Formula One racing cars to like just your general Toyota driving down the road. You can like max out that Toyota, drive around the streets. It's still probably going to be okay. Whereas a Formula One car, you like a little bit off with something and it's blows up in flames.
And it's like you said, Steve, there are always exceptions to the rule. Some people are more prone of getting injured, but it's then kind of independent of probably swinging things around, because we also know that only because you're deadlifting with a round back doesn't mean that you are more likely to get injured. It's more probably stems from the fact that you are more prone of moving in that way that gets you hurt. And it's not the deadlift with a round back or so. And also, when you are stronger, probably you increase the chances automatically, independent of how you necessarily move, because you're putting just so much more stress on the body. And then there we can once again apply the theory of like there are always exceptions to the rule, because most natties, they don't deadlift 300 kilograms unless you're someone like Kaifi West, for example. Right? He is probably having a high risk of injury, but yet the way that he's built, he still pushes through those things just fine. And it's like you said, most people will probably more so hit a wall and hit systemic fatigue rather than injuring themselves on a movement. And because we're doing resistance training, injuries always happen at some point. But I don't necessarily, it is most of the time due to using momentum in a controlled fashion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your terminology there and talking about like using momentum in a controlled fashion is important. Like it's just like a bit of drive, aggression to get it short. I think that's the key. And also key to me is like, it's like a thing with some of my clients who will be like, where do you call bent over row like 0 RAR? Because it's like, how much jerking can you allow for? I'm like, once you no longer feel like your back is the limiting factor and you're just flailing around, like you do one of those reps, you've gone past, you're like technically failed at this point. So I think that's cool too. And then, yeah, it's just also, I think, kind of clarifying to people where technical failure was. Like, is it once I can't reach the leg curl pad all the way to my butt, or is it once my hips slightly rise? And it's just like trying to have a clear defining rule of, okay, and this is something I work with clients with. I'm like, hey, a little bit of technique breakdown could still drive more stimulus, but you need to like have a cutoff point. So I don't know, easy one is like lat pull downs. Maybe you don't have to touch your chest every time, but you have to at least get below your nose, and then just like keep that as your kind of standardization. Because I think we've spoken about it too, where it's like you don't want to standardize to the fault of stimulus. It's like stimulus is the goal, not standardization. Standardization just allows you to track the stimulus, if that makes sense. So it's just kind of helping people understand that too. Because I think, especially when you lift in an RP style of fashion, that people might call it, just very slow and controlled and strict, if you go just very deep that way, I think you can end up like not pushing yourself appropriately hard. But actually it should allow you to push yourself even harder, because it puts you into positions that are even more challenging, and it makes you control positions that are even harder as well. So you just have to make sure to not like make it easy for yourself. Nothing good comes from making it easy.
No, absolutely. And I think that this is also, once again, a thing of experience. You have to do this often enough to know what it feels like, to know what productive training sessions and also a productive rep feels like, what type of momentum is still acceptable. And it is then sometimes very helpful to have someone by your side who has more knowledge and experience than you, to then tell you like, okay, this was still acceptable and this wasn't. Because when we lack the experience and knowledge, we justify sometimes bad behavior. And also we sometimes simply can't identify flaws in our technique and also flaws in our momentum, for example. We think that we are moving appropriately. We think that it's great technique, but sometimes we're just like blind to reality. We don't want to see the truth, even when we are looking back at our technique. And this is then where something like this comes in so handy, or like having some professional by your side. You can watch them do the things and what it's supposed to look like. And this is also there a little bit of a different thing than just watching it on a video, than being there and then trying to replicate that while the other guys are watching. You know then that you should be moving a little bit more adequately. And I think that this goes such a long way.
Yeah, I think it's, the way I describe it, it's similar to like someone who, they don't know how, they've never really lifted in the gym that much. So coming on as an online client probably isn't ideal. They get so much out of just some one-on-one PT sessions. Or if you've never posed for bodybuilding before, you'll get so much out of that just first in-person session with a bodybuilding coach. It's similar here. Once you're relatively advanced, you know what you're doing. Like you can get a lot out of online kind of consultation, but you'll get a lot out of these small tweaks and just like absolutely making sure everything's spot on, that then you can carry that forward. It's kind of like that education now you've got for life. You won't forget what that feels like to really challenge a muscle now. 100%.
And especially when it comes to these things that we are always talking about. Once you open up Pandora's box, once you know what a pump feels like, once you can finally target your back muscles, your growth, your progress accelerates. Because then you finally have figured it out for yourself, right? You have found the recipe that works for you. And then it's just like trying to replicate that sensation often enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is this the time you normally say, now we'll take a short break?
It's already overdue, but we can definitely do this. So let's do this.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
So here we are back again. And Steve, you are now in your deload, correct?
Yes, deloading.
And what's the plan afterwards?
Deloading. So I actually did train on Saturday because the gym owner was just kind enough to allow me to stay in there and train. So that session wasn't great.
Why is that?
I think it's because, one, it's not the same equipment I'm used to, but two, I think the main thing is I just wasn't in an environment that I'm used to as well. Like, you never do that. It's probably similar to when we trained at Das Gym, where like you can train yourself really, really hard, but you don't quite get the same sort of pump and feel and sensation that you get if you did it at home. So it's just like that. I actually really like their hack squat. Their like Watson hack squat was just very different to my Cybex one. Like the resistance profile, it was much more like, it was not lying down, but much more horizontal to the ground. And like, it wasn't at all scary to fail on. It actually felt great, like to grind out reps. But anyway, so I did a session there, and then basically Sunday off, of course. And yesterday I didn't train because it was just a bit of a manic day because I've got so many competitors now, and Mike just competed this weekend and he was checking in with me, and I was a bit tired just from the weekend, sleep being slightly off, a bit more stressful working.
Makes sense.
So yeah, hopefully today I'll go in and do a bit of a light session, just fill some stuff out. But I think I'll just take a full week this week. I don't know. The last few deloads, I've been trying to find excuses to shorten them, and I'm just like, I think you probably just should take the whole week, and then after that, just back into more massing. So I have a good 2 more mass mesos, so probably a good 12 weeks more massing before considering like a mini cut / pre-diet phase before prep, and then I'll have 2 to 3 more mass phases, and then prep may very well begin at that time. I'm kind of still a bit like umming about it.
I was just like wanting to ask you, what's the sentiment like right now if you were to rate it on a scale of like 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, where 0 is definitely not going to happen and 10 is I would definitely compete. Where are you falling at right now?
I'd say 8. Pretty strong.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Especially after the weekend, seeing Mike compete, and did that kind of spurt some?
Seeing him was just so great, and obviously he went pro with the MPA. So to clarify, he competed at the MPA Novice Championships. He won his lightweight class, he won the overall, and he was awarded his pro card, which I don't know what federation that is with specifically. Let's just say it's the MPA. I think it might be. I don't know if they're attached to a larger body, like the WNBF has a few like other federations that are joint to them, but I don't think it is part of that. And it was amazing. Like, he looked fantastic. He deserved every little part of that, and he's worked his ass off over the last years for this. The amount of time and effort he's been putting into his posing is something that inspires me completely to do the same, because I know I don't have the best structure for bodybuilding, and so I'm like, maybe I can pose my way out of this. I definitely think I've gained significant muscle since 2021. I think I had very good muscle in 2021. It's whether or not I can compensate enough with the muscularity and also get into better condition to allow myself to... next time I compete, I really want to challenge every single show for winning, and I also want to challenge for a pro card. And I don't know if that's even if it's even realistic for me. So yeah, I'm like, it's funny. I had one of my clients asking me, like, what do you see as my potential in natural bodybuilding? And like, what's my potential in future? And I was like, this is just something I can't I haven't even taken him through like a diet phase or anything yet. It's just something I can't answer. And it's similar to like we spoke about, where I was like, I could send photos to someone like Cliff and be like, do you think I've got a physique that's pro caliber? But like, I think I know, like, he's not going to know if I can turn pro. Like, it's completely out of my hands. So I just think, hey, I've got to invest enough into this thing, then see where I land for that season.
I think that's the best part about going about this way. Being realistic about it and also mature about it, where it's not just like up for speculation. We can always kind of wrap our head around a potential scenario where this could happen. XYZ, stars align, a cow is walking over the street, and probably then you're turning pro or so, right? But this is kind of up for speculation, and I don't think relying on speculation in a scenario like this is the way to go. You do your very best. You tick off as many boxes as you can, as best as you can, and then time will tell.
I do realize, though, that I can't leave it much longer until I reach out to, if I do want to get a coach, I need to like bite that bullet and like start chatting and see.
That's true.
Because again, helping Mike through this, because obviously he knows what he's doing, but I can definitely see how I've helped guide him a little bit better, and having that combination of both of us has led to him having a better result than I think he'd achieve on his own. And so I'm kind of also thinking, man, when I'm helping all these other people, like say I have this similar roster next year, it'll be nice to have someone to report to and take the kind of reins there, and me not have to worry about stuff as much, and also learn. I think that is also something I get a lot from working with another coach, because we all have our preferred ways of doing things, but actually letting someone just, like, I don't know, they might get me doing stuff that's completely different to my approach, which will be uncomfortable, but also a good lesson too.
100%. And I think also there, once again, maturity speaking out of you.
What about yourself?
I'm not entirely sold whether I'm going to compete next year. Thing is, though, here over the past weeks now, the mini cut was there, of course, but didn't really buy me the time that I wanted to in order to gain, because it's something that I've talked about, I think, on the last Improving Season podcast, because there were so many things happening over the past weeks that skewed kind of my weight. I have no idea where I'm at right now, because right now, for example, I have lots of inflammation in my body, Yeah. So the past couple of days, couldn't weigh myself either again. And I can definitely tell that lots of definition has been lost. And the last time that I stepped on scale was already in the 78s, which I didn't really want to have already at that point in time. But it is what it is, right? And that's why I have to then figure out where I'm at once the body has subsided all of the stress. And then just take a look at where I'm at, how I feel, what's planned for next year. I don't think that we have any kind of massive social obligations next year, not so much as this year. So Hugh is now in school. We are not getting married what is it then, a third time? So from a lifestyle perspective, it would align quite nicely. But also I am quite exhausted by the past couple of weeks and months by now. So I first have to get rid of that fatigue that is still lingering around before actually making any kind of decision, because the last couple of weeks weren't the most productive. I mean, I still got the training sessions done. It was all right, but I can also definitely tell, such as we also there discussed last week, that the oomph and the productiveness, the pumps, they weren't really as present anymore. It was more like I'm going to the gym to go to the gym and get the work done, instead of going to the gym in order to progress.
This is something actually that came up at the seminar. Someone was talking about how every time he pushes for like a 5th week of training, he gets sick. He was like, is a 4-to-1 paradigm okay? And Mike was just kind of like, hey, like, there's no point pushing through a week where you're probably not getting the best growth, because you're generating so much stress during that week too. You're better off like, hey, if you're really having to grind through weeks, you don't want to grind through too many weeks, maybe a couple, and then like pull it back. And if you felt like you were just grinding every week, like I can totally see how like you're not, because this is probably similar to what I did that time where I like barely deloaded and then tried to push it too long. And I just felt like I'm not having the greatest sessions. I'm not feeling great. Like it's kind of nice to, it's that accumulative fatigue. It's that deload that's going to come in. That's going to be so
funny
great.
enough, Steve, yesterday I was just like, I don't know whether you do this every now and then, but sometimes I just flex a muscle, and I can tell because I don't have the greatest chest. It's kind of, what are you always calling that when you have like problems contracting a specific muscle group?
Motor moron.
Exactly, motor moron. I can easily contract the right chest, but the left chest is a little bit harder for me to contract. And when I do it though, I can tell whether I am very fatigued or not, because it's kind of like a strong fist making a strong fist, because I can contract, if I'm fresh, I can contract my chest muscle that much that it's starting to cramp and I have to release again. I can't do that though when I'm fatigued. And right now, so yesterday I was already capable of once again contracting the chest, that it gets to the point slowly now where it kind of cramps, which just indicates to me that probably also there, once again, it just confirms that rest is so much more important than most people think it is. And when someone is then saying like, okay, I'm trained 7 times per week, for example, it's all well and good. You can probably do it with a right structure and all that kind of stuff. But also at the same time, you have to back the question of like whether it is necessary and whether you are just convinced that you're doing the best, but in reality, you should actually rest more, even though that you love the gym and even though that you love the entire process of training and all that kind of stuff. Maybe the bros were right also there in that instance, that they said like, okay, rest is where you grow, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. You're not growing in the gym, are you? You're breaking stuff down. Like, you're actually growing out of the gym. And this is, I mean, I've been there because I did the tour days for like how many years? I was doing like AM and PM sessions. And I think I was just doing that because I was like, more is better. Whereas now I've pulled back and I'm like, actually, like I can't do that. Like I don't enjoy it. And I don't think it's worthwhile. Like actually pulling back has been really good for me. So
especially when you're saying that you've built a lot of muscle ever since 2021. And one of the biggest changes was switching to only training once per day.
Yeah. And yeah, I actually I have some comparison photos I can put up, but I was essentially, when we recently moved into here, I was about 180 pounds. Not that long post show, but long enough. And I have some that I recently took where I'm like, I mean, it's funny you talk about inflammation and stuff. My weight actually jumped quite a lot the last week. And I was like, I'm not going to change nutrition. It's inflammation from like overreaching or near that point where I'm just very tired. And today I weighed in, dropped 2 pounds. I was like, okay. I probably need to put food back up, like have even more food than what I was. I've been a bit less assertive with food increases. I've been trying to go at a slower pace because of hitting that wall of appetite so soon. I was like, let's try going slower.
Makes sense.
So anyway, so I weighed in maybe close to 10 pounds heavier, basically, comparatively. I was like, I look just as lean. I'm like, I'm not saying I've gained 10 pounds of muscle. That's certainly not happened. But if I could have even gained, if I've gained 5, that would be crazy. Incredible.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That would definitely show on stage. So yeah, you can't really know until you truly start like getting close to stage ready. Have you improved enough? So that's why I'm like, I'm ENRing it a little bit, but we shall see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I can see this. And once again, I'm very excited for the next season and what it is that you can pull off. But you've steadily increased over the past years, ever since like 2014 with your first shows. You've made not just like steadily, but you've made major leaps always forward. 2014 to 2017, major leap forward. 2017 to 2021, major leap forward. And you can already tell now, 2021 to 2023 so far, major leap forward. Very likely, just based on the pictures that you've taken so far. You still have some more time left before you're then digging and going into the contest prep. And the trend is never indicative of what is happening in the future, but it can tell you, gives you an indication maybe of what's likely going to happen, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of, like, because it's also getting more and more competitive. I tell you, so someone who won the 2017 UKFBA British Finals middleweight class, he won the class. He was at a qualifier that Rob was just at, one of my clients, where Rob came third, and he didn't place at that qualifier. Now, I wasn't there. I don't know how he looked, but someone of that caliber who won a British Finals, he looked fantastic. Years later, I'm assuming he has improved. Maybe he didn't come up with the condition he needed to be able to place, But man, that tells you how competitive just qualifiers are even getting. He didn't qualify for finals as far as I'm aware, which is wild to me that can happen. So I'm like, man. But also, I mean, it also shows that people can take over other people potentially as well, where maybe you weren't quite up to par against them in previous years, but now you can kind of take them over because, I don't know, you nailed your off season, the prep, whatever, which is exciting because it's, people think about, I don't know, bodybuilding is very genetically determined and having that deterministic fallacy of like, hey, if you're here, you'll never go pro. It's like, actually, like you can work a lot of things in your favor to like edge yourself up. So yeah, it's exciting to think about, but it sounds like for you, because next year's quiet, you have to compete. And also,
and there's a justification of actually then getting lean again, such as many people do in bodybuilding. Of like, then mostly or often these are the people who aren't really competitive, who then use the umbrella of contest prep for a justification of getting lean again or staying in a constant caloric deficit and all that kind of stuff.
But imagine you with completely shredded through glutes, which you can definitely get, a rear double bicep. Fuck my life, that would look so crazy.
The funny thing is, that's exactly what I've just thought when you've talked about kind of competitiveness and all that kind of stuff. I was just thinking now with the colossal titan on the back of my head doing a rear double bicep, I think that the judges, while they may not see a lot of definition then, at least not on the back muscles, I think it would be quite entertaining to see something like this, you know? And of course, you never really want to be the clown or the joke of a show. You still want to bring great conditioning. But for this, of course, the glutes are still popping out. The hamstrings hopefully then pop in as well. Yeah. And then they can probably assume that the back is being shredded as well. Yeah,
I wonder how much you could also do with tanning and makeup and stuff to cover it. I do think, I think there's probably quite a bit you could do, especially because so many people in bodybuilding have like, I know people with full back pieces that have competed and have been able to cover that up pretty well. So yeah, I wouldn't completely count yourself out from that regard. True. But that would look, just to have it clear would look crazy. Even photos from home, like where you're just not tanned at all, would look absolutely wild.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's true. And now that we're talking through it, of course, there's always then a little bit of a spark that is being ignited, or kind of a fire where you're just like, no, that sounds great, right? But of course, all the other things need to align as well, only because it's kind of otherwise being a little kid, because you have a little bit of like a drive, or you crave something, you don't necessarily want to give in.
Yeah, it reminds me of a chat I had with a client not long ago where he was like, oh yeah, I want to compete in 2024. And because I know him, I know that his like lifestyle and what he's been through. And I was like, his finances have been something that's been concerning for him. And I was like, I just outlined how expensive it can be. He was like, okay, Steve, not next year. I was like, you really have to be quite financially stable because it adds up with the travel, the tan, the hotel, the kind of memberships. Man, it's not a cheap sport.
It isn't.
So,
and I think many people underestimate that. Yeah. They like, because who is talking about it really? You just often see people competing, you know, and that's basically it. And if you're not really necessarily living in the UK, for example, because UK has a great infrastructure for then also shows. There are plenty of shows that you can participate in, and traveling then around becomes maybe a little bit cheaper than for other people in other countries, for example. But still, it is still expensive. You still probably have to book an accommodation, traveling costs in itself, right? So either you're driving there by car, plane sometimes even, or the train. So it is, no matter where it is that you're at or located at, it isn't cheap. And in the end, just doing kind of, if you're not aiming to become a pro or so, or winning a show, just doing one show, I always find it a little bit unfortunate for the people who just do the entire prep for just one show. And yes, we are always talking about that the show for us, for example, is more like a byproduct. For you, not so much, because you aim to, of course, become a pro and win shows. But for me, more so is a side product of just the entire journey. But at the same time, I would never really commit to a contest prep, like a full-on contest prep, where I try to get the leanest ever, only for one show, where then the aim isn't to place well.
Yeah. And also, you just, the first time is never the best time.
No.
You learn so much at that one show. The next time you're just going to be more competitive. Just like you could look exactly the same, but you'll be better able to pose on stage. You'll be less stressed. The peak will probably go better if you're peaking. If you need to do that, which you probably should, be lean enough to be able to peak. But anyway, like you said, and you get more photos, more stage time.
Yeah.
Because man, you're whisked in on and off stage super quick.
Otherwise, you're also a little bit gambling. You know that everything's aligned.
Yes.
Everything's running perfectly smooth. And yes, that can happen for sure. You can also increase the likelihood that things are running smoothly and successfully for you. But at the same time, you're gambling because you only have that one shot. And you better not miss this one shot because otherwise it's an awful experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the worst again when you don't place how you feel you should have or any of that, you just get another opportunity. So very, very well said. I don't think we have anything for the listeners to look out for. Actually, they can, because Scott, the video guy from RP, was at the seminar. So I'm sure they're going to be releasing some of the training footage from the guys. So have a look out for that at least.
And on another note, if you are interested in L&D 24, we have already come up with a new page over on our website, revivestronger.com. You can head over to L&D 24 then, and then sign up for the newsletter so that you are staying in touch with us and also that you're being notified when there's new information coming out for then L&D 24, where then we've learned, also Steve and I, we've learned a lot about the structure now, how we want to run things in the future. At first, with London 23, it was a little bit of a different setup at first that we had in mind. We've realized that it's probably not the best setup, and then we switched things around in the midst of planning everything. And now we kind of have learned our lessons, and we know what to aim for, what to expect, and probably then also all of the listeners, everyone who's interested knows what to sign up for or what it is that they can expect in return as well. And maybe also knowing that this event will take place next year. If you want to participate, then you can already start saving a little bit of money for it, because it's definitely worth the trade-off of exchanging the money you can always earn. What it is that you're learning there is maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't say it any better. If you guys want to see any kind of people's reviews from the day or anything like that, or want to ask any questions, just drop me a DM. People have posted about it, posted their thoughts and feelings about it. And I mean, they kind of said very similar to you, Pascal, someone was like, hey, it just reminded them that they should invest in things that mean a lot to them and take a risk, that puts them out of their comfort zone. So yeah, stuff like this. Thank you guys for listening. Definitely get involved. Make sure to sign up to that just so you know about it at least. I guess we'll catch you next time.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.